We're living a time of extremes, from the mysterious fulfillment of ancient prophecies to AI in our world and computer chips in our bodies. It's clear that the rules have changed. To make sense of the emerging world, here's everything you need to know. There's something missing in our story, the story that we tell ourselves about ourselves and believe to help make sense of the world around us, the world of our past, and the world that we're stepping into in our future. People say to me all the time how amazed they are at the seemingly spontaneous series of events that are happening in the world, in the airports, grocery stores, supermarkets, just on the street. People say, Greg, isn't it interesting that all of these things are happening at the same time, that they all appear to be happening spontaneously, whether it's social change or climate change or political change or the breaking of the social bonds that hold our families and our societies together, the natural disasters, all of the things that we're faced with in our lives today. Isn't it interesting that they're all happening at the same time? Well, there's something missing in our story, and that something is that we are involved in a process. And it's a process that is rarely spoken about in the mainstream. I want to talk to you about that process right now. I want you to know I've lost friends having this conversation because a lot of people are very uncomfortable acknowledging and describing what it is that we're about to explore here together in this series. There's a process that is unfolding and has a beginning. It has an end. We are in it. The only way out of it is to go through it. This process has an expiration date. There is a sequence of events in this process, and it's a process that began long before we ever appeared upon this earth. If we are to believe what our most ancient and cherished spiritual traditions tell us, there was an event that began in another realm long before the earth realm ever began to reflect this process. We call it typically the struggle between light and dark. In this world, light and dark become the polarities of good and evil. You and I are involved in a struggle between good and evil. Now, I want you to know this is more than a metaphor. Many people, when we talk about good and evil, they think that it is a sidebar in life, that it is somehow peripheral to what we're doing in our everyday lives. And I want you to know that nothing could be further from the truth. If you don't know that this battle is unfolding, if you don't know the role that it plays in your life and in our world, then the events of the world will seem disconnected, disjointed, spontaneous. They won't make any sense at all. So let me talk to you a little bit about this ancient battle, the battle between good and evil. The goal of the battle is very simple. It is to deny us our divinity. Now, that is a word that I know is charged. It's got a lot of baggage. It means different things to different people. So let's break this down. Divinity, many people link with religion. And I can see why, because there are schools of divinity that make that connection and they do good things and they're good schools. So I'm not taking anything away from that. But the contemporary definition of divinity brings it front and center in our lives rather than something peripheral that we maybe think or talk about on occasion. So let me just share with you that definition. Contemporary definition of divinity is the ability to transcend perceived limitations. And that's it. Now, I want you to think about this. You have something within you, the ability to transcend. That means not just to fix, not just to survive, but to become more than, to transcend whatever the challenges that life brings to your doorstep. Whether it's a health challenge, a relationship challenge, a financial challenge, an abundance challenge, a psychological challenge, an emotional challenge, whatever it is, there's something within you that is so rare and so precious that you have the ability to become more than whatever that challenge is. Perceived limitations. I love this because those perceived limitations suggest that you and I are most probably living in our lives limits that are not even ours, they're not even real. We are living the limits that we have been indoctrinated to accept, that we've been coerced to accept, that we've been mandated to accept in some cases. Where do those limits come from? Well, they come from the world around us. They come from our family at first, the beliefs that our family have about us and what is and isn't possible in the world and what we are and are not capable of doing in our lives. It comes from our society. It comes from culture. It comes from religion. These perceptions come from science and the false assumptions of obsolete science. They come from our own experience and our inability to transcend the hurt and the suffering that we've had in our own lives. And through all of these things, we begin to place limits upon ourselves about what we can and can't do and what is and isn't possible in our lives. Divinity is our ability to transcend perceived limitations. When you begin transcending perceived limitations, you become a very powerful person. And that is why it's important to know about this ancient struggle, ancient but not obsolete, the struggle between good and evil. The goal of the struggle between good and evil is to deny human divinity, to deny you and to deny me, our ability to transcend our perceived limitations. What does that mean? It means that divinity is where we find our power in this world, in the earth realm, in these physical bodies that house and allow us to express our deeply spiritual convictions. Maybe in other realms it works differently, but we're here now, and this is what I want to talk to you about. The relationship between divinity and biology, because the divinity is only possible through your body, through the quality of the biology that you maintain in this world. So the goal of this ancient battle is to deny us our divinity. Why would that be a goal? It's for the reasons I'm sharing right now. Because when you are living your divinity, divinity frees you from fear. Divinity frees us all from fear. And I think you'll agree with me that fear has become a very valuable commodity in this age where we're living the convergence of so many cycles that are coming together. And this helps to understand why the world looks so crazy. We're living a convergence of astronomical cycles, of geologic cycles, of cosmological cycles. Many of those cycles have been identified in our most ancient and cherished spiritual traditions, certainly from the Mayan calendar and the Aztec calendar and the Hopi prophecy and the Hindu traditions and the cycles of yugas. We could go on, and I've done this in other videos. I don't want to be redundant here. The point is that we are barreling down the path of a convergence of cycles. And what we're seeing happening in the world, this process, has an endpoint. And that endpoint has been identified as the year 2030 for a number of reasons. I just mentioned some of them: cosmological, astronomical, the political cycles, geologic cycles. So the craziness that you're seeing in the world is the result of power structures and forces and individuals jockeying to find the best position, to place themselves in the best position as we reach the close of this window of time, this 2030 cycle. And it happens to be when the forces of good and evil are at their peak. And we're witnessing this. There are ebbs and flows of good and evil throughout history. The world is defined. Our world is defined by this struggle between good and evil. All of the inventions of the past, all of the wars of the past, all of the economies that have risen and fallen, people and power structures that have lived and died are all in support in one way or another of this fundamental struggle. If you don't know that, they look like spontaneous events. They look interesting. They don't seem to make a lot of sense. When you can see the process that is unfolding and the fact the process has an expiration date, and I'm not saying it's January 1st of 2030, but it is in that window of time. We are witnessing the power structures that have succumbed to forces of evil that are coercing us into making decisions in our lives, indoctrinating us in some cases mandating us into making decisions in our lives that are not good for us necessarily. That when I say us, I mean we as humans. They're not good for life, not human life. They are in support of agendas. And this is why your divinity is so important. Because when you embrace your divinity, you free yourself from fear. Divinity frees you from fear. Now, let me give you some examples of what divinity is, because we often think of here's our everyday life, here's divinity over here on the side, and every once in a while we do something divine. Divinity is the foundation of your life. Divinity is your ability to navigate this life in a healthy way. Divinity is an expression. An expression of divinity is your imagination. That's an expression of divinity. Your creativity, your imagination, your innovation, your ability to communicate your ideas, to vocalize and communicate and share your ideas with another human. Your ability of empathy, sympathy, compassion. Healing begins with divinity. How can your body heal if you are instilled in a belief that you're not worthy of the healing or that you're not capable of that healing? Your love begins with divinity. Love is one of the highest expressions of divinity. Forgiveness. Our ability to love without fear, to forgive without the expectation that something will come back to us in our forgiveness. These are all deep expressions of human divinity. So you begin to see why the denial of our divinity would benefit those who want power and control in the world. Because when you surrender your divinity, you and I become vulnerable to the ideas and the agendas of others. We become more susceptible because we're all spun up in the fear. And that's precisely what's happening in the world right now. There are events playing out in the world, and I'll talk about them in another episode. But there are events playing out designed to keep you and I distracted, designed to keep us spun up in the fear that distracts us from our own divinity. Now, when it comes to a battle, when we think of a battle, typically we think of conflict with opposing forces, all right? Force against force. I want you to know that that concept is obsolete when it comes to this ancient struggle between good and evil. If you believe that you're going to overcome the evil in your life through direct conflict, that's what keeps you stuck in the ancient fear. That's what keeps you stuck in the beliefs that prevent you from living the best version of your life. Now, I want you to listen, because I'm going to say this, a very different way of thinking, and I've had some pushback on this. We don't want to win the struggle between good and evil, because to win implies conflict, force against force, and one force becoming stronger than another. This is a deeply spiritual battle, and there's something much more important happening here. It's not about winning, it is about triumph. The way that we triumph over evil in our lives is by living what it is that evil wants us to deny. When we live our divinity, remember the goal of evil, the goal of this ancient struggle is to deny us our divinity. We want to triumph in that struggle. We live our divinity. What does that mean? It means live the best version of your life. Live the best version of your life consciously, with kindness. We're going to talk in these episodes about precisely what that means. But I want you to see how different this is. Rather than pushing back on the things that are bringing you suffering in your life. Now, we all know we have to fight sometimes, and I want to talk about that as well. When we're talking about this conflict, rather than pushing back, the deeply spiritual principle that empowers us is to move forward with living our divinity, even in a world that may not support. What does that mean? It means imagining without limitation. It means creativity. It means innovation. It means the ability to share with one another the ideas and the innovations that we have. It is the ability to love, once again, without fear, the ability to forgive, empathy for another living being, which is being conditioned out of our young people right now. When we live our divinity, live the best version of ourselves, that is how we triumph in this ancient struggle between good and evil. Now, there are many kinds of evil, and evil is very deceptive in the way that it shows up in our lives. I remember I'm smiling because I remember when I was a kid growing up in a rural community in northern Missouri in the Midwest back in the 1950s, 60s, early 70s. We had conversations about good and evil, and it was always kind of a joke. A little red devil on one shoulder with a pointy tail and horns, and an angel over here, and them going back and forth having these conversations. But I want you to know evil is showing up in our lives in ways that we may not recognize. And I want to share those with you because I want to give you something concrete that you can take with you. If you never see another one of my episodes, I want you to have something right here that is rock solid concrete. I'm going to share it with you right now. How do you know when evil shows up in your life? It's more than an abstract concept. I mean, you have a gut feeling. It's, oh man, that's bad, that's evil. But when you are asked to embrace policies in your community, or when you are asked to put something inside of your body, or when you're asked to make a choice, here's a concrete benchmark that will give you a rock solid tool to know whether or not this is evil that is expressing in your life. Evil may be defined now as anything that denies us our divinity. All right. Once again, let's go back to definition. What is divinity? Divinity, the contemporary definition, the ability to transcend perceived limitations. How do we do that? Imagination, creativity, innovation, the ability to empathize, to sympathize, to have compassion, the ability to love, the ability to self-heal. All of these are expressions of divinity. Anything that you are asked to do that denies you those abilities is an expression of evil. I want you to know it straight up. Now, what you do with that is a choice, and we all have to make choices. And our choices are nuanced. And I'm not suggesting anything other than that. I'm inviting you to be conscious of the role that evil is playing in your life and in my life, in your world and in my world. I'm going to give you some examples of different kinds of evil. Of course, there's kinetic evil, where we actually see it play out in the physical world, on the battlefield of Gaza, on the battlefield of Syria and Lebanon, and the battlefield of Ukraine and the struggle with Russia. Those are kinetic forms of evil fighting against one another. Okay, those are obvious. But there are less obvious forms of evil. There's psychological evil. And you and I are all casualties of psychological evil. If you are engaged in any kind of social media interactions, and it's for this reason, there are algorithms that are designed through the use of social media to turn us against one another, to divide families, to divide communities, to divide society, to divide nations from other nations on this planet. And there are reasons for that. I'm going to talk about them in future episodes. But I want you to know that there is a psychological evil that is playing out. And we are being led to embrace an idea that's not true and that supports a narrative that allows others to further their agenda at the expense of us hurting ourselves, hurting our relationships with our families, communities, societies, or within our own bodies. The narratives that we are powerless victims in a world where we need something outside of ourselves to be the best version of ourselves, that is a form of evil. All right? Psychological evil. There is kinetic evil, and we just spoke about that. We're seeing the attempt to normalize evil in entertainment, and you certainly are aware of this. We are seeing things depicted and portrayed, not just in movies, but in music. Some of the award ceremonies recently in televised music were literally satanic rituals that were playing out on the world stage that are becoming normalized so that we turn a blind eye and we say, oh, well, that's just art. Is it art, or is there something deeper that is going on? I want you to be aware of the attempt to normalize evil, the adult relationships with children that are being skewed, the relationships between men uh, and women that are being skewed, between partners that are being skewed, not just men and women, but partners that are being skewed. These are all expressions of evil. There's technological evil. Technological evil. That is the attempt to replace our biology, our natural bodies, with synthetics and artificial components. And let me share with you why that's a form of evil. Because, as you'll see in future episodes, we can only access our divinity and express that divinity in this world through our bodies. And when we give our bodies away to technology, when we compromise the systems of our bodies, when we replace our neurons and our cells and other parts of us, and I'm not talking about an occasional hip replacement or a knee replacement. I'm not talking about that at all. These are one-offs. What I'm talking about are the proposals to begin implanting all newborns with artificial and synthetic technology the moment they take their first breath in this world. The excuse is, the reasoning is that technology, whether it's AI in the body, computer chips in the brain, chemicals in the blood, RFID chips under the skin, nanosensors moving throughout the circulatory and the respiratory systems. What we're being told is that this gives us an advantage in life. Is it efficient? Yes. Does it help us to deal with problems quicker? It may. What are the trade-offs? We're not being told of the very high price that we're being asked to pay by accepting these technologies into our bodies. And the highest price is the relinquishing of our divinity, because we are relinquishing our humanness. And this is what I'm going to talk about in the next episode. So what I want to say to you right now, this ancient struggle between good and evil, it's very real. It's not just a metaphor. It's so common that we have accepted it in many areas of our lives. And you know what happens when you begin doing that? You have a center line of what you believe to be true and what you accept in your life. And then an exception comes along and you say, well, I can compromise and make a little exception. And it moves you a little off that center line. And then pretty soon another exception comes along. You know where this is going. And it moves you even further off the center line. Pretty soon you have accepted so many things in your life that you would never typically accept. You're way off center. And that is precisely what is happening in this fundamental battle between light and dark, good and evil. Much more than a metaphor. It is the reason for everything that you're seeing playing out, everything that you're seeing playing out in the world and in your life today. And the reason for all of that is because there is an unspoken prize. The unspoken prize is what I want to talk about in the next episode. So thank you for the opportunity of sharing these ideas with you, of unfolding this process so that together you and I can become conscious and aware of what's happening in our world and in our lives and make healthy decisions for ourselves and our families. Thank you so much. I look forward to our next.